Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us on day 2 of our Policy and Practice Forum. We are now going to dive into the panel presentations for emerging technologies. My name is Heather Subert, and I will be moderating this portion of the forum. I currently serve as the section chief of the Scientific Analysis section at the FBI Laboratory and am the Emerging Technology Subcommittee Chair for this forum. Prior to my current role at the FBI, I was the unit chief of the Firearms Toolmarks unit and held various positions conducting DNA examinations at the FBI Laboratory. I was also employed as a forensic scientist with the Department of the Michigan State Police prior to my career with the FBI. I hold a Bachelor of Science from Michigan State University and a master's degree from the University of Florida. We have 5 panel presentations for you today that discuss a wide range of topics in relation to emerging technologies in the field of firearm and toolmark analysis. These include discussions of virtual microscopy software like Evofinder and Ballistics IQ, as well as a reference population database of firearm toolmarks. Please type any questions you have for our presenters in the chat. We will answer your questions during the panel Q&A session after all the presentations. Our first 2 presenters will be discussing how their agencies utilize the Evidence IQ Ballistic IQ imaging software system. First up is Lacey Oden, who is the crime scene supervisor for the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. Lacey has worked for the Escambia County Sheriff's Office for 15 years, spending 12 of those as a forensic field training officer in the crime scene unit before her promotion to supervisor. Lacey holds a Master of Forensic Science from Oklahoma State University and is a certified International Association for Identification Senior Crime Scene Analyst. Lacey has coordinated and instructed block training for sworn law enforcement personnel at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office and is also a certified FDLE instructor and a part-time vocational instructor for the Escambia County School District, where she instructs cadets at the Law Enforcement Academy.
Hi, my name is Lacey Oden. I'm the crime scene supervisor for Escambia County Sheriff's Department, and I'm here today to talk to you about the law enforcement perspective of Evidence IQ's Ballistics IQ imaging system. So I'm really excited about this piece of equipment. It's one of my favorite tools that we have in the crime lab. I'm here today to talk to you about how we acquired it, how we implement it, some benefits, limitations, and just a little bit of forward thinking on the equipment. To start off with, though, first, I want to talk to you about how we've actually acquired this machine. I was actually contacted by a local consultant by the name of Jan Johnson. She was having a demo done at her office by Evidence IQ. She thought our agency could really benefit from this machine. Jan's aware that we have a lot of high gun-related crimes here, and so she really thought this piece of equipment could bring a lot of valuable evidence to our unit in helping solving those crimes. So I went to the demo. Stephanie, Jeff put on a fantastic presentation. They basically just told us this system, you can scan casings into it, you can submit the cases for analysis, and they could tell you how many firearms were used, what type of firearms. They can even provide potential links to other cases as well. And it sounded absolutely fantastic to me. And not only that, they could do it in a short amount of time, which was huge. So after I left that demo, I came back to the office. I did a demo here for chain of command. They agreed with me. They loved it, signed off on it. We purchased it April 1st, 2020, and we ended up actually implementing it into our system May of 2020. The next thing I want to talk to you about, which you might be asking, is why did we acquire this equipment? So as you can see on the screen, I put up some stats that we have, the number of firearms that we take in every year, also the number of casings that we bring in every year. Our population is just over 300,000. So as you can tell, we have a large amount of firearms and casings that are brought into our jurisdiction. And if you're in this field, you know as well as I do that obtaining physical evidence such as fingerprints and DNA is very difficult on firearms and casings. In addition to that, we do not have an in-house firearm examiner. So any ballistics done, we would have to send that to our state lab. Right now, our state lab's backlog is about 3 to 6 months. So that is 3 to 6 months we are sitting there waiting on information that could really help us solve these crimes. So I want a piece of equipment that could actually do that for us and provide us a quicker turnaround time on intel that we can use to help solve these crimes. The next thing that I wanted to discuss with you is how we've incorporated this piece of equipment into our workflow. So once we purchased it, we did do 2 days of training with the company, very easy training. Once we were completed with the training, Evidence IQ gave us a lot of SOPs and templates that we could use from other agencies to help us build our SOP. So I did that. We wrote up a very technical SOP. Once that was done, then we started actually incorporating the equipment into our workflow. So what we do is every single casing that is turned into our evidence unit is rerouted to our crime scene unit. When a crime scene technician gets the casing, they'll document it, they will swab it for DNA evidence, and they will process it for fingerprints. Once that is done, they will actually upload it into Evidence IQ's Ballistic IQ imaging system software. So all of those casings, every single casing, regardless if it's a homicide or found property, will be uploaded into the gallery. Same thing with test fires. If we have a firearm that we want to test fire and submit that into the system, the crime scene techs will process the firearm first for DNA or fingerprints. They will then transfer custody to a sworn officer who will then take that firearm to our local ATF agency, and they will test fire it there. They will then bring the casings back to us, where we will then upload it into the gallery. Every single time we make a submission, a report is generated on our side. In addition to that, it is also put on a spreadsheet that I like to keep for stats and documentation purposes. Now, every single case that we submit is not a full case submission, because with this piece of equipment, you pay per case submission, and I think it's around $260 something. Our agency has a 3-year contract with the company where we are given 100 cases a year, and that is what we have to work with. So we basically save our case submissions for homicides or any type of major shootings. So not every single casing that we upload into our library is actually submitted, but every casing is uploaded into the library. So that is actually how we implement it into our workflow. It's really great with case submissions. If we want to submit something to them, it'll come back with 2 reports, a crime scene analysis report, which will basically tell us which casings you want to enter into NIBIN. It'll tell us what type of firearms possibly belong to these casings. In addition to that, it'll tell us if these casings have any potential links to any other casings in the system. If it does have a potential link, a second report will be generated that is just a potential link report. It'll explain why it's a link with a bunch of images that the firearm examiners go over with us. So those reports are given to us. We upload those into our database for documentation purposes. I then notify the investigator, and the investigator will follow up on the lead. So that is basically how we use it into our workflow, and I'm going to go over some examples of how they use that intel as well. Something else that I provided on here was some stats for Ballistics IQ. The stats on this is going to be dated for November 18th, 2021 when you see this. We've uploaded 34 case submissions. We've scanned 1,971 cartridge casings. The turnaround time for analysis, it says on here 2 hours and 12 minutes, but I'll be honest with you, I've gotten results about 45 minutes or less. So it's very quick turnaround time. Of the 34 case submissions we have done, we've actually gotten 27 potential links, which is just, it's absolutely phenomenal. We would have had no idea that any of those casings or those cases were linked to our other shootings. And then aside from that, we've identified 157 unique firearms. So again, these are just stats from last week, and actually we just had a bunch of major shootings and homicides over the weekend. So we're actually a little higher now on that end. And you might be thinking that, 1,900 casings aren't a lot, but you have to keep in mind that we've had this machine since May. We have to build the backlog that is in the library. So that just takes time and resources. Has nothing to do with Evidence IQ or their software. It's just manpower hours, really, and resources. So when the techs are not busy on calls, they are working on our backlog. We have about 2 years of backlog in there right now. Moving on, the next thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about was the benefits of our agency using Ballistics IQ. First and foremost, timely results. They are fast. If you're going to send something to a state lab here, again, 3 to 6 months, here with this company, they could give us results in less than 2 hours. They are very, very quick, and that is quick, fast intel. Something else, they are very cost effective. So they will build the budget or build the contract around your budget. So we have a smaller agency next to us. I think they only get 20 or 25 cases a year. So whatever your budget is, they will work around it. And they also offer payment options as well. Something else the system does is it triages. So if you want to upload something into NIBIN, and half of my unit is IBIS certified, and you know as well as I know, if you are certified, you also have to become triage certified, which is a very time-consuming process. Well, this machine has an algorithm that does the triaging for you, so it really speeds up the process. Management, this device, when you purchase it, it is yours to do what you want with it. Whether you can decide when you want to use it, when you don't want to use it, the company has no control over that. So you are in full control of this program. So now I wanted to continue talking about the benefits, and I wanted to talk about the unique ability that this machine has to identify unique firearms. If you upload casings in there, it'll tell you specifically what type of firearm you are looking for. In addition, it can provide immediate intel, and it is portable and rugged. So you could bring it on crime scenes with you. And while you're processing crime scenes, you can be uploading these casings, and it'll tell you what type of firearms you're looking for. Or if you get out with a suspect who has a firearm on him, you could take that person into custody. We could take that firearm, we can go test fire it. We could take those test fire casings, upload into the system. System can tell us, hey, that firearm, those test fires match the casings on your shootings. And then you go back to the suspect and you lay that information in front of them and have them explain to you why the firearm in their custody came back to matching the casings on scene. And the look on their face is absolutely priceless. And it's one of my favorite things about this machine. That is not something you're going to get with any other technology right now. Aside from that, customer service is fantastic. They're available 24/7. There's an option for shared networks, which we do. So when I make a case submission, if I am on a shared network, it'll compare it against any other agencies in our area. And I'm going to talk to you about an example where that actually came into play. It's also very simple to use. It's very user-friendly. And again, as I previously mentioned, it is lightweight and it's portable as well. And then just a few things that I did want to touch base on was some success that we had with it, and just to show you how we've utilized this information. Like I said, we've had 27 potential links found using this device. One example was a homicide that occurred in Okaloosa County, which is about 2 counties over. That agency has Evidence IQ, Ballistics IQ imaging system as well. They uploaded their homicide casings into the system. 2 days prior, our officers get in a pursuit with the suspect, which resulted in a shots fired and the suspect becoming deceased. Well, he had a firearm in his custody. We took it, we test fired it, we uploaded it into our gallery, submitted it, and it ended up matching Okaloosa's casing. So now we have the firearm that was used in their homicide. And that's just one example of many that we've been able to link as of late. Another example I have is a pretty major homicide we had a few months ago. 50 plus casings were in it. It kind of made headline news around here. We submitted those casings. It's a large amount. Stephanie had 4 of her examiners working on it. Hour and a half, we had results that told us of those 50 something casings, they came from 3 different guns, which kind of blew our theory out of the water because we were thinking there was only one possible suspect. Well, come to find out, we now have 3 firearms, which ended up turning out there was 3 shooters. That's why. I was able to create a sketch with the layout of the casings using the information from the crime scene analysis report from Evidence IQ. I was able to lay out where each of these possible shooters were located when those casings exited out the firearm. Investigators loved that. It gave them a general idea of reconstruction of the scene and how it laid out. In addition to that, we got 3 potential links in that case. So the firearms that were used in that case were linked to 3 other previous shootings. Those 3 previous shootings, we had possible suspects that they were able to follow up on leads on, which ended up or resulted in us finding the suspect to our major homicide. So that was a huge case for us. We were really excited to have that intel. Just 2 more things. I just want to talk about the limitations of Ballistics IQ. As you can see, I only put 2 things up there because I don't really have a lot of limitations on this machine. It's really fantastic. The biggest thing is it's a presumptive tool and you have to use it as such. So if you want confirmatory testing done, you have to send that to your state lab. Also the backlog, again, it really has nothing to do with the company itself, but if you're going to take on this machine, you need to understand that's going to take time to build your gallery. So you're talking about resources and time and all that. So if anything, those are just my 2 limitations. The last thing that I wanted to discuss with you was some forward thinking. So a few areas of concern. Talking to this company, they are looking at providing confirmatory testing. And if they do that, there's going to be an additional charge. So that is something that companies are going to have to think about as budget. Admissibility of Ballistics IQ. I've testified in court a few times on it. I've had a few depots. I have not had any issues. But the reason why I put it as an area of concern is I foresee this equipment becoming very popular, more agencies using it. And I think the more something becomes popular in the field of forensics, defense attorneys and so forth, they're going to look at ways of trying to tear it apart. So that's why I put it under areas of concern. But again, as long as you use it as a presumptive tool, which is what it is, I think it should be safe. And also agencies just not utilizing this machine to its full potential. The problem I have is, again, I have all these cases I could submit for analysis, but I need the investigators to find the time to give me those cases. And they're just so busy, they haven't had time. So I really don't feel like we are using this to its full potential yet, but we will get there. Something else, I think a lot of people confuse this equipment or this system for NIBIN. It is nothing like NIBIN. It's not a competitor of NIBIN. Kind of going into forward thinking a little bit, I do foresee a lot of state labs or agencies that have NIBIN using this machine in conjunction with NIBIN because it can triage. It takes out the human flaw in there. It could triage things for you a lot quicker. So therefore it could be uploaded to NIBIN a lot quicker. So I foresee that kind of happening in the future. And also right now, orientation, we have to manually orientate those casings in the system themselves. I do foresee in the future, the system itself will be able to do that for you. So that will really speed up the process as well. Again, I also foresee more agencies getting this equipment. We're going to have more shared networks, more potential links, and in the end, just being able to solve crimes a lot faster. So that was all the information that I have for you. That is how our agency utilizes this machine. Like I said, I love it. I don't really have a lot of negative things to say about it. So I think it's a great tool that every agency should have. So thank you for listening. I hope you took some value away from this presentation, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Lacey, for your presentation and sharing the great work you have conducted with the Ballistics IQ. If you have any questions for Lacey, please type them in the chat and we will get them answered during the panel Q&A session. Our next presentation will be given by Deion Christophe, who is a forensic firearms examiner in the Plano Police Department's Firearms Examination Unit in NIBIN Center. Deion was previously employed as a firearms examiner with the DC Department of Forensic Sciences, Oklahoma City Police Department, and Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Laboratory in Austin. He has also served as a professor with the University of Central Oklahoma's Forensic Science Institute. Deion is a distinguished member of the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners, member of the Association for Crime Scene Reconstruction, member and past president of the Oklahoma Division of IAI, advisor with the Oklahoma Innocence Project, and a visiting adjunct professor with Staffordshire University in the United Kingdom.
Hello, my name is Deion Christophe. I'm a firearm examiner with the Plano Police Department in Plano, Texas, and this presentation is Ballistics IQ for the Crime Laboratory. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a disclaimer. Obviously, the presentation that I'm about to give are the views of myself and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the City of Plano or the Plano Police Department specifically. All the information in this presentation is for information or educational purposes, but it shouldn't serve as a substitute to any outside professional advice and is not presented as an endorsement for any of the products that we discuss. So just a bit of history about the Plano Police Department Firearms Unit. We currently serve well over 63 agencies in our area, and we provide forensic firearm services and analysis to law enforcement agencies throughout the greater North Texas region. The unit serves as a regional ATF NIBIN entry point, and we were established in 2004. Under that umbrella with ATF, we provided critical analysis and support to any of the investigations and prosecution of criminal activity involving the use of firearms. During that time, in the recent years, our state lab is no longer equipped with NIBIN, so many of our policies and procedures have had to be adjusted to where we can support those agencies that are in need. Much of our success has been a direct reflection of our ability to provide timely examinations comparable to that of our state laboratory using our local government resources. Just to give you a bit of information in regards to how much of an increase we've seen since 2016, our laboratory has seen a 300% increase in evidence submissions. So obviously we couldn't maintain this particular case increase unless a solution was chosen to help us advance. So we adopted Ballistics IQ in April of 2021. And when we obtained the system, we had several objectives that we were seeking to investigate. The first was it suitable for Ballistics IQ to triage both evidence exemplars and test-fired exemplars for entry into NIBIN. We also wanted to evaluate the system's accuracy, specificity, reproducibility, and timeliness in regards to cartridge case triage. The most important aspect there was that not only would this be support to our NIBIN technician, because the system actually uses an algorithm that identifies the most suitable cartridge for NIBIN entry, but more importantly, we wanted to know, does the system's triage algorithm coupled with the VCC, which is their virtual correlation center, include a known match cartridge case and exclude a known non-match cartridge case when most appropriate. During that time, we also wanted to evaluate whether or not there were any risk associated with adopting that system as a laboratory triage aid. That was a big, important question that we received from our laboratory management. One of the main things before we talk about some of the results in the summary associated with our validation that I want to mention is that the validation of Ballistics IQ's performance was evaluated based on the manufacturer's recommended operating procedures, meaning that we didn't want to go into the validation only assessing the quality or the performance of the algorithm independent of the VCC. Because it had been recommended that both aspects of the system be used, we wanted to validate the system in its entirety. So we began our validation study in April of 2021, and we went live with Ballistics IQ in September. But during our validation, we employed several different validation studies that were previously known to the firearms industry. We also utilized some CTS proficiency tests. And the results that we found to be most memorable or notable in this particular situation is that Ballistics IQ was successful in providing investigative information in a timely manner. On average, we were seeing crime scene analysis triage reports returned within under 2 minutes using the system's algorithm. We also were seeing VCC approved triage reports that were being returned in under 3 hours. Now, the system itself was effective in identifying the number of firearms present amongst groups of cartridge cases. But in addition, what we noted is that the system's algorithm, while it was able to identify and associate unknown matches to the firearms present within groups, the algorithm actually has restrictions and triage confidence intervals that were notable, where it would group cartridge cases in high confidence, low confidence, and also in undetermined groups as a notification to push the user to basically utilize the VCC as a supporting element. So this was really viewed by us as a way to protect you from yourself. We noticed increased accuracy and specificity when the system was utilized to its fullest ability. And in addition, one of the things that we did was we changed our policy to where everything that came into the laboratory would be triaged. And the reason for that is that we noticed that the Ballistics IQ system as a whole was most capable of optimal performance when coupled with the expertise of the VCC. So I know that a lot of questions that we get even today revolve around the misunderstanding of duplicate work. And what we have began telling agencies that submit to us is that while it seems like the added value may only be in the eye of the beholder in relation to who has the technology and how they're using it, using this technology is only a minuscule piece of the overall endeavor of solving crime. One of the things we noticed about the system in its entirety is that there were a lot of things that we did not expect to find. One of the things that we have chosen to do is we triage everything through the system first. That helps us immensely because we have this 3-tiered analysis. So we'll enter things into Ballistics IQ, we'll then transfer it to microscopic analysis, and then it goes into a verification phase. So all of our evidence is essentially being reviewed 3 times on different levels of analysis. Additionally, we have external administrative oversight with our NIBIN technician. Anytime we enter anything into the Ballistics IQ system and we submit it to the VCC, we're notified immediately of any errors in entries, any orientation issues, or anything that may be wrong in the documentation or the data based on the information that's contained within the entries. So we've also noticed an increase. We've all become more efficient in time management across our lab, primarily because we have a consistent flow of how things go. Everyone works on BIQ, then it goes to microscopic examination, and then also to verification. And obviously, NIBIN is in the middle between the Ballistics IQ triage and the microscopic examination. We also have a huge increase on the dissemination of intelligence as far as the CSA reports coming back and also the approved VCC reports coming back. As soon as those are returned to us via email, they're reviewed and immediate notification is sent out to the investigative agency, as well as the detectives that may be assigned to that particular case. We've had a massive amount of internal and external communication, a lot of questions in regards to the intelligence or the packet of information that's now being submitted. Agencies are not only intrigued by the amount of information they're getting in these emails, they also are very motivated because now they know how many guns they have, what cartridge cases exist in those particular groups associated with that particular firearm as well. And now they have information that they can run with in regards to their investigation or how they want to approach that particular case. Great advancement for us was the addition of what we call multi-system links. We've had several cases here at Plano PD where we've had cases that are Plano specific that have tied to one another that have been triaged through Ballistics IQ. And once a cartridge case has been selected to go into the NIBIN system, we'll get a NIBIN lead, and that particular lead will lead us in a direction that's well outside of our borders or our boundaries, to where we are seeing kind of intelligence in action is the way that we refer to it as. With these multi-system links, we specifically have identified that BIQ and NIBIN are huge complements of one another, and they validate each other. We've also seen a backlog reduction. Prior to Ballistics IQ or the implementation of Ballistics IQ, we ran into an issue where we would try to control what we would bring in so that we wouldn't overload ourselves. But what we noticed is that even though we were taking more cases in, we still couldn't keep up. And so having this triage component now, we can focus on cases that actually go through triage. We receive notification that those cases need a court written report for the detective, and we can get those done, and everything else we just triage through the system and wait for feedback. We've had a decrease in turnaround time from approximately 12 days to 7 days, and that's on that's constantly declining as well. Again, part of that process of accepting protocols when we had that 300% increase was that we would try to take in a certain amount of cases at one time and get out what needed to be worked immediately. With the triage, we're starting to see that there are a lot of cases, disorderly conducts, shots fired, where there may not be a suspect in mind, but at least we're getting that intelligence out in a timely fashion. And while we're not hearing any feedback now, we may hear feedback in the future. So in summary, I'll leave you with a couple of things. One of the things that we do here at Plano PD is we consistently pay attention to a lot of the crime data associated with violent deaths associated with firearms. And I'm sure this is no different to your area of investigation than it is to ours. But here in the United States to date, there's been well over 39,000 gun violence deaths and more than 629 mass shootings. Our region, specifically Northeast Texas, is a huge area of concern because of the increase in gun crime. And one of the elements that we've identified in combating this is that we have a strong forensic firearms investigative capability. Now, here at Plano, we've identified that through research and application, we can actually help in the advancement of investigations. We can also assist in proper utilization of administrative resources and increase that judicial processing time from crime scene to courtroom. And from a laboratory perspective, whether it be case backlog reduction, attempts to decrease that turnaround time, the proper utilization of administrative resources, or simply enhancing the quality of intelligence that we're able to disseminate, we feel that, any agency that's out there that's looking for a solution should really have some type of firearms investigative capability, or at least explore it. And that's what we did in order to put this into action. So one of the most important cases, or one of the recent cases that has been very important and influential for us and motivates us to continue what we're doing, has been a case that we worked for Gainesville, Texas Police Department. In this particular case, we had 4 suspects, 39 cartridge cases that were submitted across 3 different incidents, all of various calibers. And while the evidence on these cases or these incidents had been collected, none of it had been examined at the time of submittal. Through triage, we were actually able to link the weapons that were recovered in a previous search to the cartridge cases found across all 3 incidents in under 3 hours of submission into Ballistics IQ. In addition, the email notifications that were compiled based on those Ballistics IQ reports were able to be disseminated all in the same day of analysis on that system. The initial information that we had received from these investigators at the time of submission was that they had a hunch that these particular individuals may have been involved in several crimes, but they only had evidence connecting a string of different events. And as you can see in the box there, this Ballistics IQ link ultimately connected a drive-by shooting, a traffic foot pursuit with shots fired, and also a previous aggravated assault with a deadly weapon incident So what we've learned through application is that while it may be difficult to disrupt the cycle of violence, appropriate use of technology, intelligence, resources, partnerships, and effective communication all play a major role in assisting in this effort to solve crime. And that's what we strive to do here at Plano PD. So I hope this presentation has been helpful in understanding ballistics IQ and how we've implemented it into our laboratory processes to help us with our backlog reduction and also with helping us disseminate timely intelligence to our investigators. And I'll be happy to take any questions that you have at this time.
Great presentation, Deion, and great to see you again. And thanks so much for bringing this to the forum today. Our third presenter is Michael Beddow, a forensic scientist with the Phoenix Police Department Crime Laboratory, and he will be discussing the validation and implementation of Evofinder in his lab. Michael received his Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from Northern Arizona University and his Master of Science in Forensic Science from the University of California at Davis. His professional career began as a laboratory NIBIN technician employed by the Sacramento County District Attorney's Crime Laboratory. In 2008, he accepted a position as a forensic firearms and toolmark examiner with the Phoenix Police Department Crime Laboratory, where he has worked for the past 14 years. Michael is also a member of the 3D Toolmark Technologies Technical Working Group.
Hello all and welcome. My name is Michael Beddow. I am a forensic firearm and toolmark examiner with the Phoenix Police Department Crime Laboratory. I have the honor of presenting to you today our validation and deployment of the Evofinder system. For more than a decade, researchers, both forensic and academic, have been investigating the application of existing surface metrology and three-dimensional surface topographical microscopy methods to the field of forensic firearms examination as it pertains to bullet and cartridge case comparisons. The application of these techniques to our discipline has resulted in a new technique known as virtual comparison microscopy. This process involves comparing high-resolution 3D surface topographical images of tool marks present on fired cartridge cases and bullets as compared to traditional optical light microscopy, or LCM. The examiners are conducting the same type of analysis as traditional comparative microscopy and still following standard methodologies within the field of firearm and toolmark analysis. However, these comparisons are being conducted on a computer screen as opposed to looking through a microscope. Many may ask why a laboratory should pursue VCM. As with most all processes, techniques, and equipment, traditional light comparison microscopy has its advantages and disadvantages. However, until the implementation and deployment of VCM equipment and software, LCM was our only method for the comparison of tool marks. So in the event particular sets of tool marks were difficult to observe using LCM, there was no additional methods available to attempt to resolve these tool marks. Certain tool mark types are inherently difficult with LCM, with one example being fine granularity on a highly reflective surface. All too often, these types of tool marks are difficult to resolve due to hot spots created by the intensity of the reflectivity from the surface. With the deployment of VCM technologies as a new tool to assist forensic scientists in the comparison of tool marks, there is the potential to increase our examiner's ability to clearly observe more or all of the tool marks present with sufficient clarity to render an opinion. Even though the Evofinder is not completely immune to reflectivity issues, this problem is not as pronounced as with LCM. Furthermore, VCM using the Evofinder for all intensive purposes has an infinite depth of field, allowing the examiners to observe more of the tool marks in a single view without continued adjustment of focus. This idea of providing our examiners with a new tool was one of the primary reasons for pursuing VCM with our selected equipment, the Evofinder. We can expand the number of tools that our firearms and tool marks examiners have at their disposal, the greater the likelihood we can reduce the number of inconclusive results reached in our examinations. Once our decision was made to move forward with the purchase of an Evofinder, it was done so with the sole intent of utilizing it for VCM. Even though the Evofinder has the potential for toolmark databasing and computer-based comparisons, we do not intend or did not intend to utilize it for these purposes and are currently not utilizing these features. Our police department has a large investment in the NIBIN IVIS program for our firearm and toolmark databasing purposes. Therefore, the deployment of new equipment or databasing was not necessary. With regards to computer-based comparison features, even though we are currently not using them, it is something that will be evaluated at a future date. We wanted to deploy the equipment and begin VCM prior to investigating any of the computer-based conclusion support. Several years ago, when we began investigating into the possibility of implementing VCM into our laboratory, we spent quite a bit of time looking at multiple vendors who provide VCM hardware and software. Our investigation included telephonic discussions with vendors, hands-on demonstrations, either within our laboratory or at multiple ACCI conferences, as well as presentations and workshops hosted by specific vendors about their technologies. Our primary focus when evaluating all of the available systems was centered around four main categories: operator ease of use, system versatility, i.e. the system's ability to scan or acquire tool marks both on bullets and cartridge cases, image resolution and quality, and speed of acquisition. We wanted to ensure that whatever system we selected would be versatile and usable by the average examiner. At the end of the day, we decided upon purchasing an Evofinder system. Across the various different VCM systems available on the market, a range of different microscopy methods and technological methods are utilized. The Evofinder system utilizes focus variation topographical microscopy to create a 3D rendering of the surface topography of the items being scanned. Its ability to scan most all tool marks present on cartridge cases and bullets, coupled with relatively quick acquisition times and exceptional image quality, made it an ideal candidate for validation within our laboratory as a virtual comparison microscope. Now the task of designing and completing a validation of our newly acquired Evofinder was upon us. At the time, very few other laboratories across the nation had begun or had completed a validation of a VCM system. Our validation team spent quite some time designing our plan to ensure that upon completion, we would be confident in our examiner's abilities to visualize tool mark patterns in a VCM format, as well as be confident in the reproducibility of the 3D images being produced by the Evofinder. This was accomplished through the use of the NIST standard bullet and cartridge case, previously completed externally produced proficiency test samples, in-house created samples, both bullets and cartridge cases, and bullet and cartridge cases from previously completed consecutively manufactured tool mark studies. Once again, both bullets and cartridge cases. Our validation included the completion of hundreds of comparisons across numerous sets, including both bullets and cartridge cases of multiple calibers, tool mark types, and cartridge case and bullet construction. All comparisons were completed by 8 practicing firearm and tool mark examiners. Additionally, numerous samples were selected for repetitive entry into the system to test the reproducibility of the scans and images. Upon completion of our validation, no false positives or false negatives were reported. The quality, resolution, and reproducibility of the scans were excellent, demonstrating no concerns with feature dropout or inclusion that would affect the examiner's ability to utilize the images for comparison purposes. Ultimately, our conclusion was that the Evofinder system was fit for virtual comparison microscopy within our lab. This entire process, system selection and especially validation, was full of valuable learning experiences for all of us, both as VCM validation designers and VCM validation participants. Historically, it has been an unspoken rule, if you will, that comparison conclusions must be reached through physical observation of the tool marks by means of LCM, and could not, or at least should not, be reached by looking at pictures of the tool marks. The quality and resolution of the images being produced by most all of the VCM systems on the market has changed this mindset. However, it has presented a new set of challenges and learning curve. One of the first things that we noted when training on the system and evaluating the validation results, to include interviews with the validation participants, was what we're referring to as information overload. The volume and detail that is seen by the examiners in a single view is much greater with VCM as compared to LCM. This drastic increase in information being presented to the examiner all at once takes some mental conditioning in order to train the eye and the mind to see the patterns within. An analogy that I like to use to describe this is the difference between looking at the stars in a large city and out in the country. In the city, you may be able to easily find the Big Dipper or Orion's Belt, as the stars making up these constellations are very bright. However, when in a location devoid of light pollution, so many more stars are visible that it may take you longer to find these two constellations among the rest of the stars. This doesn't mean that the patterns of these constellations have changed. There's just more information to sort through before the pattern can be found. This information overload and learning curve with visualization of the VCM images caused examiners to be more conservative in their conclusions until they became more confident in seeing the tool marks in this new format. We realized that we would have to require a larger volume of practice be completed by each examiner prior to beginning our validation. This would have increased examiner confidence in the use of the system and in the completion of the microscopy through VCM. This slide shows two cartridge cases fired by the same gun as viewed through an LCM at 22 times magnification using oblique fluorescent lighting. Typically, the tool marks on these cartridge cases would be compared at a magnification between 30 and 40 times. This view through the LCM has excellent clarity and resolution of the tool marks present, but does not contain as much information as the same two cartridge cases viewed through the Evofinder system on this next slide. This image shows the same two cartridge cases with the screen zoom set to 100% on the Evofinder system to simulate as closely as possible the view seen in the previous image captured through LCM. Notice the increased volume of fine detail seen throughout the image. This forces the examiners to look at much more detail in the same view. Until an examiner becomes used to seeing this new format, this increase in detail can be mentally and visually overwhelming. Upon completion of our validation and approval through our laboratory administration and quality manager, it was now time to determine what was the best way to implement the Evofinder and VCM into casework. After much discussion, we developed an implementation plan to ensure that our examiners were as confident as possible with the use of this system. This plan involved a soft start approach, if you will. We selected a 6-month implementation window in which VCM would be used in conjunction with LCM. This plan required that all comparison cases be completed with LCM first, and then a minimum of 50% of all those cases be duplicated on VCM, with at least one sample of each level of conclusion being duplicated. This would allow the examiners to complete the comparison optically and then see the same tool marks virtually. With this implementation, the examiners were required to show both LCM and VCM data and images in their analysis notes. In the event that an inconclusive light comparison microscopy duplicated on the Evofinder resulted in a definitive conclusion, so either an identification or an exclusion, any additional inconclusive comparisons completed on LCM would be then completed on VCM. As of this presentation, we have recently concluded this implementation window and are now in the process of establishing the Evofinder as a standalone microscope to be used at examiner discretion. If sufficient practice with the Evofinder system is chosen for VCM within your laboratory, Evofinder or other, this implementation period may not be necessary. If all examiners are confident enough with the use of their system after training, practice, and participation in validation, a laboratory may be able to go straight to casework without the required coupling with LCM. With that, I believe in hindsight that this implementation period has been good for our examiners. It has allowed us to build that necessary confidence in the use of the system by allowing all of our examiners to see actual casework samples with both LCM and VCM. As much as we attempt to make training and validation samples as real as possible, nothing can truly replace actual casework samples. Overall, I would recommend this implementation design / soft start approach to other laboratories. This process will allow all your examiners to gain that real casework experience with VCM, as well as the added bonus of getting our customers and the courts accustomed to seeing the additional information and image type from VCM within our notes. With the completion of our implementation period and continued use of the Evofinder in casework, the results have been as expected. We were not expecting the Evofinder and VCM to be the end-all be-all. However, a new type of microscope for use within our laboratory. Some sample types have proven to be best suited for LCM, some for VCM, and a few benefiting from both. The conclusions thus far are looking promising. Some inconclusive LCM comparisons have been able to be successfully identified or excluded with the use of the Evofinder. As expected, VCM is not suitable for all sample types. This is either due to the condition of the sample or the practicality of using VCM versus LCM. Some excessively damaged bullets or comparisons of firing pin impression sidewalls are not well suited for VCM with the Evofinder. This may change with time. However, the practicality of using VCM for all samples over LCM is not there yet, such as comparisons involving Glock firing pin aperture shear or high point breech faces. These comparisons are typically so quick and simple with LCM, it may not be worth the extra time, albeit a short amount of time, to scan these types of items into the Evofinder. For some cases, LCM may just be quicker. Over the next several slides, I would like to show you just a few samples we have been collecting demonstrating VCM and LCM, and that they both have their place within a forensic laboratory, and that VCM can be a wonderful addition to a lab, but not a replacement for LCM. This slide shows a Glock aperture shear with the LCM image on the left and the VCM image on the right. While both images demonstrate good correspondence of the stria on the VCM image on the right are more defined and crisper to the eye. These images are the relatively smooth hemispherical firing pin impression. In the LCM image on the left, I know it's kind of difficult to see, but you can see it where the pointer's at right here in the middle. There are some unique small individual characteristics at the center of the impression. They show up as a small curve and a few dots beneath it. As the cartridge case was rotated, more features similar to these were observed. When viewed on the Evofinder, these particular features were more difficult to resolve if we could resolve them at all, and this is due to the nature of the type of lighting and the way the image is being captured. These images are of tool marks in a character in a buncher tool impression. This is an example where the tool marks are visible and comparable within both comparison methods, while neither of them necessarily being better than one another. There are differences in contrast, but not in clarity or visibility for use by the examiners. Several questions have been asked of our laboratory about the potential increases in efficiency with the validation and implementation of the Evofinder and VCM. Increase in casework efficiency was never a point of consideration throughout our validation or thus far in our implementation of the Evofinder. With that said, it is definitely something that can be tracked in the future now that we have completed our implementation period that I discussed earlier. Since implementation, we have been recording which cases are completed with LCM, VCM, and or both through fields within our LIMS system here at the lab. So as time passes, we may have the ability to track usage and potential associations with efficiency. So what's next for us here at the Phoenix Police Department? Now that we have concluded our implementation period and have our Evofinder set up as a standalone microscope, we will continue to collect data related to its use. This will help us track which tool mark types are most suitable for VCM with the Evofinder and any potential increases or decreases in efficiency, and most importantly, any decreases in inconclusive results. In the future, we look forward to investigating the potential implementation of computer-based comparison results to help support our visual conclusions. Although we have only had the Evofinder in a validated state and in casework for under a year, I truly believe that VCM has its place within the Firearm and Toolmark laboratories. And with that, I thank you all for taking the time to let me speak to you today, and I look forward to answering any of the questions that you may have when we reach that section of the presentation. Thank you again.
Thank you, Michael. Great presentation today. The next presenter is Alan Zheng, a mechanical engineer with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Alan will be discussing a federal collaboration to create a reference population database of firearm toolmarks. Alan has a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering. He focuses his research on objective measurements, comparisons, and statistical weight of evidence reporting of 2D and 3D firearm toolmarks. He is currently a member of the Subcommittee on Firearms and Toolmarks in the National Institute of Standards and Technology's Organization of Scientific Area Committees for Forensic Science. Alan is also the chair of the Technical Advisor Committee for the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners and the co-chair of 3D Toolmark Technologies Technical Working Group.
Hello everyone, my name is Alan Zheng from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Today I want to talk to you guys about the reference population database of firearm toolmarks, where I'll be referring to as RapidFit from the rest of the presentation. So some of our collaborators here is Johannes Sims from NIST as well, Eric Smith from the FBI, and Martin Biker from the Netherlands Forensics Institute. Before I get started, standard NIST disclaimers. Any commercial equipment that we mentioned is not an implied endorsement, and these are my personal opinions and not that of NIST. So let's talk about motivation. That really hasn't changed since 2009 and 2016 as well, where we see these reports come out evaluating forensic science, and they typically have the same kind of theme. The criticisms are that the state of firearms and toolmark analysis these days are dependent on a subjective decision, and it lacks a statistical foundation for the estimation of error rates or the weight of evidence. So the whole goal here is to transition firearms and toolmark analysis from purely subjective to subjective with an additional objective component and the addition of a statistical foundation. And ever since these reports come out in the past decade, we've seen a lot of advancements in addressing these concerns. The first of these is the transition from looking at 2D images to three-dimensional measurements of the surfaces, which provides a more accurate representation and more repeatable representation of the tool marks that you observe. This also allows algorithms to have more repeatable data for which to calculate the objective similarity metrics. And on top of that, the second arm of this advancement in research in firearms and tool marks is the addition of algorithms. Now, you can actually take the X, Y, Z data points that you measure and put it through an algorithm that calculates an actual number, which quantitatively allows you to evaluate similarity between two tool marks. Now, most algorithms are divided into two major categories. One is area-based correlations on the left here, where you're looking at the entire surface and you're correlating everything, the good, the bad, everything is included. Same thing can be done for striated tool marks, such as the land impressions of bullets. On the bottom left there, you see the cross-correlation function, where you can take the striations and turn them into 2D profiles and do the same analysis. Now, there are some weaknesses to using area-based correlations. Like I mentioned, you're taking the non-informative or damaged areas into consideration as well. So the other side of the coin here is something called a feature-based correlation, where instead of looking at the entire surface, now you break up the surface into smaller areas. I'd argue this is what examiners like yourself would do on a day-to-day basis. You ignore all of those damaged areas and non-informative areas and focus in on the individualizing tool marks, which you use to make your conclusions. So we've done something similar in feature-based correlations as well. Dr. Johnson and NIST invented the congruent matching cells method, which essentially breaks the surface up into smaller areas, and then each of those areas is searched on the compared surface to find the best location. Also for striated tool marks, you can do CMS, consecutive mark-to stria, algorithmically as well. That's another feature-based method. So with measurements moving forward and algorithms moving forward, there's also standardization efforts within the OSAC, which stands for the Organization of Scientific Area Committees, which is sponsored by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, where we're writing forensic standards. This is consensus-based standards across the entire United States for all aspects of forensic science. I've been part of the Firearms and Toolmarks subcommittee for the past 6 or 7 years now. And just recently, we were able to publish these 3 documents you see on the screen here, which addresses how do you take quality 3D instruments, how do you track your quality, if you have a software, how do you validate that software, and also how do you implement these things into your forensic laboratories. On top of that, other standardization efforts have been in place, such as the Open FMC, which stands for the Open Forensic Metrology Consortium, which essentially is a group of vendors, researchers like myself and forensic practitioners got together and standardize the way file transfer happens across different types of instruments in a file format called the XRP, which allows for any instrument to read each other's data without having any proprietary code behind it. So now let's look at the goals. We've established the foundations of how do you take measurements, how do you do correlations, there are standardization efforts in place now. This is where RapidFit comes in. The goal of RapidFit essentially is to create a national database of ground truth comparisons, similar to how when you were trained, you were given proficiency tests where the proctor knew all the answers and the ground truth conclusions for each of those pairwise comparisons. Now, what we want to do is build a database of many, many different types of firearms, different types of ammunitions, and look at what should a known matching comparison score and what should a known non-matching comparison score. And I'll get into more of that later on. So this is a collaboration, like I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the talk, between the FBI, NIST, and the Netherlands Forensic Institute. Back in 2017 at an AFTI conference, we got together and basically said, instead of each of us doing very similar work all in parallel, how about we just collaborate and build a tool that everyone can use? And that's how RapidFit was born. The Netherlands Forensic Institute created a user interface and a databasing system to keep track of firearms and toolmarks, where now we can integrate NIST algorithms that I mentioned earlier into that software package, and with the FBI providing the reference firearms collection and all the data required to build these reference populations. So what is RapidFit? At a very basic level, I want you to think of RapidFit as a gigantic score table where each of these rows has a corresponding score. I'll turn on my pointer here and show you what that looks like. So every single row, you have basically two firearms being compared, and each of those firearms has metadata or class characteristics associated with that firearm. So make, model, caliber, those kind of things. And of course, with that firearm, you're generating some sort of test fire. Keep in mind, this is a ground truth database, so we know exactly where all of these test fires come from. With that cartridge case in this first example here, you have all of the class characteristics associated with that cartridge case for firearm 1, firearm 2, and then you would then calculate a score. So in this first example here, this is a known matching comparison, and you generate a score associated with that. Now, the neat thing about RapidFit is this score is now tied to all of the class characteristics associated with the firearm and the ammunition used. And I'll get to why that's important later on. Second example, you can do the same thing for bullets. This is a non-matching bullet. Again, you have all the class characteristics from the firearm and the bullets. And you do this thousands and tens of thousands of times where you create a reference score table of what should a known match look like, what should a known non-match look like. And from that, you can then start looking at statistics. So in the perfect world, statistically, all of your same tool comparisons should score very high. So on the bottom here, you see comparison scores. Further to the right, the higher the score. On the y-axis here is the probability of attaining a score. So obviously with different tool comparisons, you want all of those scores to be low. If you have these two distributions separated, you really have no errors. So this is a very simplistic way of looking at it in a perfect world. Now, in the real world, we all know that that's not the case. You're going to have inconclusives. Sometimes your different tool comparisons will look very similar to the subclass. Sometimes your same tool comparisons won't look very similar just because of poor markings. So what we need to do is sample a lot of different known match and known non-matches to build these blue and red curves. And the key here is now we can use the relevant populations based on those class characteristics that I mentioned, which are tracked along with the score. From there, from these blue and red curves, we're able to now look at something called a likelihood ratio, which gives you the weight of evidence. And likelihood ratio essentially is a very simple concept where for your evidence comparison, let's say you get a score of S. Now, all you're doing is you're taking that score of S and taking all the class characteristics from your evidence and pulling up a database of similar class characteristics, known matching and known non-matching. So these blue and red curves are from the reference population that relates to your particular evidence. And now all you're looking at is what is the probability probability of attaining a score S, given that it came from a known matching population, which is this top portion, divided by the probability of attaining a score S, given that it came from a different tool comparison or known non-matches, this denominator here. So if your likelihood ratio is below 1, which means this crossing point N to the left, that supports that your particular piece of evidence did not come from the firearm. If your likelihood ratio equals 1, which is right at this crossing here, you're equally likely to observe a score of S from either population. And then from 1 all the way to the right, 1 to infinity, supports that this particular piece of evidence came from your firearm. And the higher the likelihood ratio, the stronger their support. So I just mentioned relevant populations. What does that actually mean? Again, we want to make sure that we're looking at the correct background population. Those blue and red curves need to relate to your evidence at hand. So any firearms examiner worth their salt will know that if you see a Glock cartridge case, you're not going to go looking for similar comparisons in a high point population. Same thing here. We want to make sure that we're looking at the correct population of ground truth scores to be able to justify our evidence. So again, RapidFit is filled with all of these pairwise correlations of known matches and known non-matches, all related to their class characteristics, and that's where the power comes in. All of the database entries from the reference population will have the firearm with all of their class characteristics, and the same thing for the bullets and cartridge cases. We'll have all of their class characteristics as well. So our goal is to continue to build this database, to expand the reference population, to expand that pool of relevant scores that are available to the actual examiners. And the way it's built, it's on a hierarchy. So if, let's say, you have the suspect's firearm, you have the ammunition, you know a lot about the class characteristics of the case, you can be very specific all the way down to the very bottom of that tree with all the class characteristics. And maybe it's an oddball firearm or oddball ammunition type, and the reference population just doesn't have that much data there. There needs to be some sort of minimum data threshold before you're able to make those blue and red curves. So in those cases, RapidFit is able to move up a level in the hierarchy to be a little bit more generic and provide you with more data points. Now, the higher up the tree you go, the more those blue and red curves start merging together because now you're adding more noise. So workflow example looks like this. You have a question item recovered at the crime scene. You recover a suspect's firearm, you do a test fire, and the firearm examiner is always in this process. We need them to be the first line. It will make a determination of, let's say in this case, an ID. Then you measure these two cartridge cases on their breech faces, put it into the system, and calculate the score. And in this case, we got a CMC correlation of 19 cells. So this score is now fed to the RapidFit background reference populations. And one thing to mention, since this is a Glock firearm, then now you're going to only look at Glocks in your background. So these blue and red curves here demonstrate what a background population of 164 known matches of similar types of Glocks and 2,000 known non-matches of similar Glocks as well. And now you put in your score 19 cells, and now you can calculate likelihood ratio or other statistics based on that, the distribution is shown here. So how RapidFit will work in the national framework is FBI will be the arbiter of this database. I want you to think of it in a parallel like the CODIS database, where all the reference database is already residing at the FBI. So you as a forensic laboratory would then submit a request to the FBI with your measured evidence or your measured evidence plus a score and all the class characteristics. And the FBI would then return a report with the weight of evidence and the quantitative measures and all the reporting required from that. Now, we have been keeping commercial vendors in mind because we always want to spur innovation. Our methods right now for similarity may not be the best. There may be newer ones out there, and there may be better ones out there. We also want to make sure that the vendors are motivated to continue to innovate. So we want to make sure that the commercial vendors' algorithms are also available within RapidFit. So the nice thing about RapidFit is the reference data is all going to be stored in XVP, which is readable by all of the different vendors. And let's say vendor 1 says, I'm ready to come into RapidFit and I want to be part of it. So we would take vendor 1's algorithm correlate all of the reference data that we have and create its own table. Remember that table I showed you earlier with all the known matches and known non-matches. Now vendor one has a specific result table that's stored within RabbitFit. So you as a laboratory who have a vendor one instrument and an algorithm, when you ping the RabbitFit database, it will only look at that particular table to calculate your statistics. The same thing for any additional vendors down the line. So now I want to show you a little bit about what kind of milestones we've achieved so far and what it actually looks like. So on this screenshot here, you can see the reference database here. In this case, we're looking at Ruger's. And you can add a firearm. Once you add a firearm, you have to add a cartridge case or a bullet. After that, you add data and you trim it out into an actual process breech face impression mark. And of course, any kind of cartridge cases you measure in there, you can trim out multiple regions of interest, such as firing pin, aperture shear, and those kind of things. So when you add a new firearm, you can see a very exhaustive list of class characters available here. We want to make sure we be as specific as possible, especially for the reference database. The cartridge case evidence, same thing, we have a list of class characteristics that we're interested in, and then you just add a data set afterwards. Once you add a data set, there's some pre-processing involved in the background to create that breech face impression, meaning we have to localize only on the breech faces. So that involves a little bit of trimming of the data to bring out the breech face itself. And this is what the software looks like right now. So once you do that, you can see on the left here a list of about 120 or 130 guns here. Each of them have an number of test fires, repeats, and each of these are processed and stored as an individual impression mark. And this is a screenshot of what the comparison will look like. And you get a correlation score here, as well as a CMC score involved as well. So once you've done this for the entire reference population, this is where we built in this relevant population filter, where now you're able to go in and filter out exactly what you want to build your red and blue curves for known matches and known non-matches. So up here you can see the toolmark selection types. So we're looking at impressed toolmarks, breech face impressions. And down here is a list of class characteristics that you can go edit to say, I only want to look at Glocks, or I only want to look at Rugers. And then you can even filter by model, you can filter by caliber, those kind of things. Once you've set your filters, on the bottom here, we'll show you how many non-matching scores you have and how many non-matching scores you have. And with that, you can build your score tables that's completely filtered based on those class characteristics that you just put in. So this is what that actual table looks like. The example I gave you earlier, this is it in practice. You have a reference cartridge case, a compared cartridge case, a correlation score, number of CMCs. You can see these are all the known matches, and then you have a tab for the known non-matches. Using these tables, you can now build these reference distributions to calculate any statistics moving forward. So on the left, you see ACCF for Glocks and the number of CMCs for Glocks on the right here. And these are just examples of what we've used in validation so far. So one of the things that we're currently introducing into the software is statistical packages. So model fitting to these data sets, as well as how do you limit likelihood ratios? So this is a topic of heated discussion these days, where likelihood ratios, like I mentioned, can go from 1 to infinity. Now, once you get into those astronomical numbers, it doesn't always make sense, and it's hard to kind of conceptualize. So the NFI has done a lot of research in the past looking at how to limit likelihood ratios in a justifiable way so you can actually defend it without saying, 10 to the 28th. What does that even mean? So we're going off of this paper here by Peter Vergeer from NFI, where they came up with methods to limit likelihood ratios based on the size of your population. So those are the kind of things that we're going to be putting in the future. So again, some of the milestones, our initial validation tests are going to be looking only at Glocks and Rugers to get this database going and running. So currently there are 393 Glocks in the database and 314 Rugers. All of the data has been processed, and we have over 11,000 known matching scores. And we potentially could generate 1.3 million known non-matching scores. But currently we're doing a balanced subset of only about 11,000 1,000 or so non-matching scores to build those distributions. And our statisticians are evaluating how many scores we actually need. So all three agencies and their statisticians are collaborating right now to come up with the validated and justifiable statistical protocols to be able to build the models as well as calculate the likelihood ratios. So some future milestones, by the end of 2022, we're going to be able to pilot test this in the FBI with either old proficiency tests or parallel casework just to see and validate the whole process from start to finish. And hopefully at that point, we can start building a portal for forensic laboratories externally to be able to ping the system. With that, that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions during the panel discussions or the QA sessions. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Alan. I really enjoyed your presentation and appreciate you presenting, as you were also a member of planning this forum. So thank you very much. If you have any questions for Alan, please type them in the chat and we will address them during the panel Q&A session. Our last presenter in our Emerging Technologies panel today is Sabrina Sillison. Sabrina is the Physical Evidence Program Manager at the Virginia Department of Forensic Science. She will be discussing the verification of cadre at her lab. Sabrina joined the Virginia Department of Forensic Science in 2011 as the Physical Evidence Program Manager. She is responsible for the quality and technical aspects of the latent prints, shoe and tire impression, firearms and tool marks, and the digital multimedia evidence sections. Sabrina graduated from the Metropolitan State College of Denver with a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry with an emphasis in criminalistics. She also obtained a Master of Science in Pharmacy with a forensic science focus from the University of Florida. Sabrina served as an adjunct faculty member at Phoenix College, teaching a criminalistics biological evidence course. Sabrina is a member of the International Association for Identification and the American Society of Crime Lab Directors.
Hello, I'm Sabrina Sillison, the Physical Evidence Program Manager with the Virginia Department of Forensic Science. And today we're going to talk about our verification and implementation of the Cadre 3D scanner and virtual comparison microscopy software. I will be discussing the three verifications the Virginia Department of Forensic Science completed in 2021. The first was focused on the equipment, the second on utilizing the virtual comparison microscopy software to conduct comparisons of cartridge cases, and the third was the use of the virtual comparison microscopy software to sample or group cartridge cases without conducting a complete comparison examination. I will describe how the department implemented the software into use for NIBIN cases as well as our future plans. The purpose of the equipment verification was to demonstrate that the equipment does what it says it does, captures 3D images of cartridge cases, and to determine limitations and sources of variabilities. 10 consecutive scans of the sinusoidal standard were acquired with 2 different gels to determine if the gels contributed to variations in the measurements. Next, we had 2 examiners acquire the scans of the standard using different gels and at 2 different times of the day for 5 days. The purpose of this approach was to determine if the user interaction results in variation or if environmental conditions, minor fluctuations in lab temperature, influence the measurements. The 5 consecutive days was to demonstrate stability of the equipment. The instrument records 2 measurements, RSM and RA, for the sinusoidal reference standard. An analysis of variance was used to compare the sets of measurements to determine if a statistically significant difference or if a variance existed between the groups. We found the gel contributed to differences, but the operator and the environment did not. The differences were so slight that they don't impact the visual resolution of the image. This slide provides a summary for the verification, and while the differences were detected, they do not impact the images viewed for comparison purposes, and we determined the equipment was acceptable for use. The purpose of this verification was to determine the limitations of rendering conclusions from 3D images. 2 types of samples were used for this verification: cartridge cases from previously completed proficiency tests and cartridge cases obtained from consecutively manufactured slides. These cartridge cases were previously examined utilizing traditional light microscopy techniques. While the purpose of this verification was to determine the limitations related to comparison conclusions, we also learned of limitations related to the use of the system and the workflow. We collected the scans with an intended efficient workflow. The technician collected the scans, but did not orient the cartridge case in the holder or evaluate the images for quality or clarity prior to providing them to examiners for comparison. This approach resulted in some images that were out of focus, and the examiner had to spend time orienting the images in the software. Each examiner was provided 10 sample sets from previously completed proficiency tests and 5 sample sets from the High Point consecutively manufactured slide study. A sample set consisted of 2 known test fires and 1 unknown cartridge case. 40 sets of images from the proficiency test were created and 20 sets of images from the High Point test. 14 qualified examiners conducted the examinations. Each set, except for set 34, was completed by at least 2 examiners. There were no incorrect identifications or eliminations. The results of 13 sets contained conclusions which differed between elimination and inconclusive or identification and inconclusive. There were no sets which had a difference of conclusion between elimination and identification, meaning we did not have any sets where one examiner identified the items as having been fired in the same firearm and another examiner eliminating them as being fired in the same firearm. For one set, the 5 examiners that compared the items recorded inconclusive results when the ground truth conclusion was identification. The examiners recorded that the images were out of focus or too blurry to be of value for comparison. The examiners utilized the Cadre virtual comparison microscopy software to conduct the comparison and document a conclusion of identification, elimination, or inconclusive for each set. Set 33 highlights how the examiners used the tools in the software to document their conclusions, which is valuable in understanding how different conclusions can be reached for the same image. This chart shows the examiner's conclusion in the first column, followed by their notes providing detail for the reasons of the conclusions in the other column. In this set, only one examiner felt the need to add notes. This may be because the examiners are required to document the reason for inconclusive, but not necessarily an elimination. The examiners annotated the images, marking the areas utilized to reach the conclusion. Areas of agreement are marked in blue, and areas that lack correspondence were marked with orange-red. 33A2, one of the known cartridge cases, is on the left, and 33B, the unknown, is on the right. This visually represents an elimination. This slide is another examiner's work on set 33. Item 33A1, one of the known cartridge cases, on the left, and 33B, the unknown cartridge case, is on the right. This examiner included written documentation as well as visual markings to explain their conclusion. This approach also includes documentation for which samples are being compared. In the previous slide, the examiner compared 33A2 to the unknown, and this examiner documented the comparison of 33A1. This slide contains the third examiner's work on set 33. The software is flexible to allow for different ways to display the areas being considered when conducting a comparison and rendering a conclusion. Having this level of documentation is very useful when examiners come to different conclusions. We can verify that they're looking at the same images, same quality, same focus, etc., as well as determine which areas they saw agreement or lack of correspondence. This gives us an insight into how the examiner came to the conclusion. This verification demonstrated that examiners were able to consistently reach accurate comparison conclusions with 3D images, but it also makes us aware of the limitations for the equipment and the workflow. We had intended a minimal user interaction with the system, a set it up and let it run, similar to the robots in the DNA and toxicology lab. But we discovered a user needs to review the images for clarity prior to sending them on for evaluation and comparison. The system at time needs user interaction to proceed to the next step or resolve any issues. So there's no setting it up and walking away. We also learned to be cognizant of sample placement to avoid sample switching, and the need to have an overall image of the tray setup to verify correct sample placement. Our third verification was to determine the limitations of 3D images to group cartridge cases for triage or sampling approach for knife and entry. The intent is to save resources by conducting a limited exam and selecting the best items for each group for knife and entry and search. This verification was conducted with a smaller pool of examiners to save resources and because we'd already demonstrated the technology was suitable for comparison purposes. 2 sets of 10 cartridge cases each were created from firearms that exhibited similar characteristics. The examiners were instructed to view the images and select or group the ones together that could possibly have been fired in the same firearm. Class and individual characteristics were visible in the images, and both could be used to group the items. As a result of the 3 verifications, we implemented the use of Cadre and the virtual comparison microscopy software for use in our administrative NIBIN sampling plan procedure. This procedure is intended to minimize examiner time and provide expedited investigative leads to our submitting law enforcement agencies. This approach is used for cases involving more than 1 cartridge case, and the purpose of submitting the evidence is to determine if the evidence is linked to another crime scene or previously submitted firearm. In the past, an examiner would conduct comparison exams on all cartridge cases. Those comparison results were then verified by another examiner, and 1 cartridge case from each group representing a different firearm was entered into NIBIN. Significant time and energy was spent conducting comparisons that were not needed for the investigative purposes. With Cadre, we can have a technician open, mark, and scan the cartridge case. This frees up significant time of examiner time. The firearms examiner conducts the comparisons on screen and groups images based on characteristics visible. 1 cartridge case from each group is entered in and searched in NIBIN. We plan to implement the use of 3D images for conclusive comparisons, not just triage or grouping cases in the future as additional funding and resources become available. The use of 3D images in firearms comparisons is a significant shift from traditional techniques and will require time, understanding of limitations, and patience to fully implement. I think it will be a hybrid approach as we move forward. There will be instances when traditional light microscopy is appropriate and other scenarios when 3D images would be more suitable.
I want to thank them all for a fabulous afternoon and demonstrating all the hard work they've been conducting in their laboratories. And I hope all of our attendees found this information valuable. We're now going to kick off our live Q&A session. And our first question is going to go to Lacey. How is the Ballistics IQ system validated?
So actually the company itself, Evidence IQ, has installed a software program in itself that has its own auditing and validation system. It has its own auditing tab where you can actually go in there and conduct all of your audits. They do their own in-house validation. There's no need for me to do any validation. That is something that the company itself does.
Awesome, thank you. All right, Michael, this question's for you. If the examiner uses the VCM first in casework and doesn't like the visual representation of the results, would they then repeat the examination in LCM?
Absolutely. This is something that we've taken into consideration with how we're utilizing our VCM system within our laboratory so that it is its own microscope. So as we currently we're working prior to implementing VCM, we run our laboratory a little bit different than most, where all of our light comparison microscopes are in one room. So we don't have a specific microscope assigned to an individual. So if I am doing a comparison and I realize the light type that I'm using on this microscope isn't best suited, I can move to another microscope. So now that we've implemented VCM, it'll be the same process. So that if whatever particular light type or source we're working with isn't best suited for that sample type, we can move on to the next microscope.
Thank you. And Deion, I'm going to come back to you about Ballistics IQ. What forms the database of the Ballistics IQ system?
So each laboratory or each user has the ability to stockpile information from test fires and also evidence cartridge cases into their particular database. Once an agency or a user begins to build that database, everything that goes in there will be compared against it. Now, if a local agency that's in the surrounding area has a system as well, then you will also compare against those agencies as well. So if they have a database built along those same guidelines, you'll have the ability to compare against those agencies as well.
And just for the audience clarification, so the Ballistics IQ database that you're searching is separate from the NIBIN database that you would then enter those cartridge cases into later.
That is correct. So these are two separate independent databases.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Alan, the AFTI theory of identification as it is written is very individual to each examiner. Is anyone working on a general theory of identification to include objective, machine-based results?
So currently, we see this as an extra tool to supplement your current conclusions using the AFTI theory of identification. Our plans right now are not to establish some sort of threshold where once you get past a certain score, we'll call it an ID, or once you're below a certain score, we're going to call it an exclusion or inconclusive. What we want to do is shift towards a weight of evidence, meaning how strong of a support do you have statistically for your conclusion of ID or inconclusive on your end. So we're not headed towards a system, at least in the rapid fit system, where you're able to call IDs or not objectively using rapid fit.
All right. Sabrina, based on your experiences, do you think it would be possible to automate the scans, or does the lab technician need to monitor the process?
We found right now our current procedures, we still would like someone there to monitor it to make sure the cartridge case goes up into the gel and comes down, as well as that the scans are in focus and all the scans are complete. So right now we're still planning on monitoring it. The person can be doing something else while they're in the room, but we don't envision it as set it and let it go.
All right, thank you. Lacey, this was addressed in a bit in the chat, but can you expand? Oops, sorry, my bad. Hang on. Got ahead of myself. All right, let me restart. All right, Lacey, this is for you. How would the Ballistics IQ company provide confirmatory testing? Would they require the casings be shipped to them, or would it be confirmed based on the images or scans?
So that's actually a really good question. So Ballistics IQ is a presumptive tool. Right now, the company does not provide confirmatory services. It is something the company will be moving towards in the future, at which there will be an additional charge to which we will send them the casings. Right now, what our agency does is we actually send it to our state lab for confirmatory purposes, and that is at no charge to our agency.
Right. I'm glad that everybody knows we are live, right? So, all right. So, Deion, this was addressed a bit in the chat, but can you expand on how the Ballistic IQ in-house database can be shared to surrounding sheriff's offices? And would they necessarily have to have their own Ballistics IQ system to view other agencies' data?
So yes, so in order for another agency to view your particular database samples, it would need to be done on the virtual comparison side. So that's how we establish whether or not we have a link to an outside agency or an interagency link, meaning a Plano case to another Plano case, is when we submit things to the virtual correlation center. So once those cartridge cases are entered and then submitted out, you would either request to search against everybody in that particular area or only within your specific agency. So I'm aware that there are a couple of agencies in our area that are going to be going live, specifically DeSoto Police Department and also Denton Police Department. So those two agencies will automatically correlate their galleries against ours when we do a potential link search. And for those reasons, one of the main reasons for that is because we work cases for both of those agencies at times because we service them as a NIBIN input location.
Gotcha. All right. Michael, can you give an average time frame for the acquisition of samples into the Evofinder system?
Yes. So for cartridge cases, the average acquisition time is between 2 to 3 minutes. It'll obviously vary based on what cartridge it is, based on the amount of head space. So 22 is going to scan faster than it would maybe something that's a 45, but on average 2 to 3 minutes. Most bullets, if they're in fairly good condition, are on average of 3.5 to 4.5 minutes. The greater the damage to the projectile, the greater the scan time, as it's requiring additional focus. And then fragments are a completely separate world that'll have to be handled on their own, and acquisition time we've had upwards of 10 minutes. But that's just trying to work it to get the focus right. But if you're dealing with pristine samples, 2 to 3 minutes for the casings, 4 to 5 for bullets.
Thank you. Alan, would we expect the relevant population to change over time or place?
Over time, I would expect it to change. Our goal is not to constantly update this for obvious reasons. The plan would be on some sort of routine schedule. If we see populations that need more data, we'll address it by adding more to it. And if we see new firearms manufacturing methods come out, we'll be creating new reference populations for those as well. So it will change over time, but we would need a good justification to go and update the existing reference population if everything's already working. As far as place, I'm not sure what that means. The plan would be to keep this housed at the FBI, kind of like the DNA CODIS database. That way we have one centralized location that's under lock and key, so the integrity of the database is maintained.
Thank you. All right, and this is for all presenters. So whoever would like to start, what would you suggest to laboratories who are interested in 3D technology, but are concerned about getting involved too soon while it's in the development stages? Are we far enough along to recommend labs jumping in on this technology?
I can start with this one because I've been asked this question before. And my usual advice to labs is you don't want to be playing catch up. As you can see, there's a lot of validation involved. There's a learning curve involved to getting the systems up and running, how to operate it efficiently. And you may need to hire trainees and technicians to start housing some of this data collection. And your internal validation is going to require data as well. So now is a good a time as any, especially with the new implementation of VCM, where you actually have uses for casework. So this is the time to jump in the water and start familiarizing yourself with the 3D technologies that are available.
I actually would like to elaborate on that too, because I agree with Alan, because this is something that our agency has dealt with in the past, where we have taken on new technology. When you tend to take on new technology that's still in the work, it tends to be a little bit more budget friendly. We've had incidences where we wanted to take on new technology and new equipment, and then we held off on it because it was still new. Not a lot of people had it. We weren't sure about its reliability and validation and all that. So we waited. Well, we waited too long to where it became so expensive that it was way out of our budget now. So, and I completely agree with Alan about progression. Technology is constantly progressing, and we definitely have to get on that boat and stay evolved and stay in the know with the new technology, because in the end, it could just help us be more effective.
And to tag on to the last two, I agree with them both. There's enough laboratories out there now that have decided to take this step and move into the VCM 3D world, covering across all the different manufacturers that are producing products out there now, that there's enough people you could reach out to start talking to, see how they implemented it, what the pros and cons are of each system, so you can help decide what the best system is for your purpose at your laboratory, and then go ahead and make that step if personnel and funds will allow.
Anyone else?
I would echo on what everybody else said, but it is a shift for the examiners, so it is something
the familiarization step, and then the, working cases side by side, and then the implementation. So this is a big shift from using a microscope to doing 3D, but it is possible. They've been doing NIBIN images for years now. So it is a shift, and it's time to get them familiar with it and take the step into it.
Well, I have to say, just from where I was sitting listening, I'm so excited to hear all of your contributions in this area. As Alan knows, it's been painful, I know, even at our laboratory. And Mike, I appreciated your slow start. Had I had that coined phrase early on, I would have put that right in, because between what Sabrina said, with it is a shift, and with all of our other casework, we've got so many things that are on our plates for our examiners. So I appreciated everybody's perspective, and but it's very exciting to hear everybody's experiences and lessons learned. So, all right, let's see. Sabrina, why are examiners only required to document reasons for their conclusion for inconclusive results? And would it be beneficial to require similar notes for identifications and exclusions?
The documentation for inconclusive only comes from our accreditation criteria, that you have to document the reason why it was an inconclusive. So that stems from accreditation, and it would be beneficial to document the reasons for the identification and the exclusion or the elimination. They do it a lot with words, that class characteristics or individual characteristics, but the virtual microscopy software can give you the capability to document it visually. And my background is in latent print, so it's similar to doing the markup of the fingerprints of areas of correspondence and areas of maybe not good correspondence. So I think we're moving there. It's just a different way of doing it. It took a while to capture images from the microscope, so it's just we're stepping into it, but it would be a best practice, in my opinion, to document all of the reasons for all the conclusions.
Heather, you're muted.
Oh, thank you. I finally did it. I knew it was going to happen. So thanks, Alan. All right. So this is for Lacey. How are the results from the system used in court? And do you still have to have a firearms examiner from your state lab work the evidence to testify?
That's another good question. So currently right now, when we do a case submission and we get the results, that goes to an investigator. The investigators know that this is a presumptive tool. Now they can use the information in it, they can include it in their warrant if need be, but they understand it's a presumptive tool and it will have to be confirmed by a firearm examiner, to which that is when we would send it to the state lab prior to it going to court. And that is something that our state attorney's office is in the know with. They know before a case goes to court, if it's something we've used Ballistics IQ on, they will make sure those casings do get sent to the state lab to confirm the results. So that way, when we go and we testify in court, they have those firearm examiners that actually come in and they testify for the confirmatory. And as a crime scene technician, all we do is testify as to what we did, which our involvement was just uploading it into Ballistics IQ. I've only had to testify in court. I mean, we've used it on tons of cases, but actually testifying in court maybe 4 or 5 times. And honestly, the defense didn't ask anything. Nothing was even asked of it. The state attorney just asked me to briefly explain what this is. I made it very clear what it is, what it can do for us. And that was it. I wasn't even questioned. Defense didn't have anything. And we ended up getting convictions on all that case, or all those cases. So hopefully I answered that, but it definitely still needs to have confirmatory testing done. And like us, we just work it out with our state attorney's office to make sure we're both on the same page prior to it going into court. We haven't had any issues from the judges sign off on warrants where we have used it for PC and things like that. So as of right now, no issues have come up.
That's great. All right, Alan, this is a pretty lengthy one, so hang on here. From your example, it looks like 164 pairs is enough for a minimum number in a reference database of known match pairs. Are there criteria for establishing the minimum number?
This is a question I've been asking statisticians since day one, and they will always say no amount of data is ever enough. But what we're trying to push right now is looking at the stability of those distributions as well, especially with the limitations of the likelihood ratio, meaning we're capping likelihood ratios off at a certain point. If you're starting to add more and more data and all the data kind of goes past that point, at that point your current system works because this is as high of a likelihood ratio as you can report. Therefore, any addition past this point would just give you the same likelihood result. But this whole concept of stability of your distribution model is something that we're going to be using to see if we have enough data points in a non-matching database.
Familiar with the statisticians and their needs, so well said. So, all right, Sabrina, did something happen that makes walking away from the running top match a concern?
We did have a few errors in the beginning phase of the project that the cartridge case would get stuck in the gel. I think we've alleviated that issue, but there are messages that do come up when you're setting up a tray that a person needs to sit there to get it on to the next step. So, and it's not something that you just click and walk away. You kind of got to read what it's requesting you to do. So there are steps in the middle that need to be taken care of during the scanning process. So nothing that caused anything, loss of evidence or anything. It just kind of delayed it because we didn't get there and clear that error message because we thought it was working away and it was kind of sitting there idling.
Thank you. All right, and this is for any of the presenters. Has NIST or any organization established baseline technical specifications for the VCM that can be used for casework, and i.e. Focus, resolution, etc.?
Currently within the OSACs, we are, and the TWIG working group there, we're working on a set of specifications. It's hard to pin down a specific number that may or may not exclude certain manufacturers. And a lot of it comes down to your own validation testing. Does that instrument fit your purpose? And does it give you the correct answer and the level of detail you need for actual casework? So some of those guidance documents should be coming out within the OSAC and the TWIG to give you a better idea.
Great. All right, this is for Michael. A participant said they found the Evofinder user interface a little tedious. What are your thoughts on that? Did your agency just get used to it?
The short answer to that is yes. Right off the bat, the user interface for the VCM side of things, the controls are very simple, mostly controlled with your mouse. So all your rotational aspects, your translational aspects are all done with your mouse. That's very simple. But there's a lot of redundancy in the buttons in association with the drop-down menus. So where you can go look for things, you can look for the same thing in 2 or 3 different places. So it just takes time to realize what way you like best to go push the button. The other thing that we haven't quite completely gotten used to is the comparison of bullets horizontally. So your dividing line inside the virtual comparator is horizontal as compared to vertical with light comparison microscopy. That takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's just something that we've learned to deal with.
Like anything, there's always a learning curve, right? All right. Lacey, do your examiners validate the potential associations prior to an arrest being made?
So again, this is not confirmatory use. So therefore, when we submit a case to the Virtual Correlation Center, a firearm examiner is looking at the casings. They are comparing it and they are issuing the reports if there's potential links or not. However, they do not testify at that point. That is their only involvement. They don't testify in the cases. They don't verify anything. That is something we have to send to the state lab to have them verify and confirm the findings, and they are the ones that will testify in court, or they are the ones that will actually work very closely with the investigators prior to it going to court to make sure that the information is verified. And so far, everything we have sent has matched what Evidence IQ has given us. So whatever their results they get on their end completely matches our confirmatory results. We have had no error rates yet.
Thank you. Back to Alan. What is your estimate for a launch date?
Todd already sent me a warning for this question, but yeah, so right now we are very close. We're getting to the final steps of completing the software. We're starting to launch some parallel pilot tests along with casework. NFI has already trained some of their examiners to work parallel casework using a rapid fit system, and then they've been providing them with some suggestions as well for the workflow and some things they would like to see, something that didn't work and work well. So by the end of this year, we should have pilot studies running. We should have some pretty good results looking forward and presenting next year. But to get this system set up, one of the things I hope everyone realizes that these reference populations are going to take time. It's a very tedious process to gather the data. The quality assurance required for this reference population is going to be much higher than any of the current measurements are being taken. So a lot of what we've been doing right now is building these things incrementally, meaning the initial pilot tests will only have Glocks and Rugers, and those are the only ones that are allowed to be used in parallel for casework. And as we start to build the database up with other types of populations, we may start incorporating and allowing other types of casework evidence to come in as well. So this is going to be an ongoing process. I would say hopefully by 2023, we'll be able to start rolling this out into actual casework past the pilot study stage. Initially, obviously, starting at the FBI with some of their casework, and then slowly start accepting results coming in from, or not results, casework evidence coming in from external laboratories as well. So we're currently still establishing a framework to allow that exchange of data from other laboratories to the FBI to conduct any kind of analysis.
All right, thank you. All right, this goes out to any of our presenters. Sorry. For those of you including VCM data in casework, how is it documented in your case file? When you create the 3D scan file, is it considered a piece of evidence like a test fire?
I will say I'm sorry. Did I interrupt you, Mike? Go ahead.
For us at Phoenix, we're doing it the same way we're dealing with light comparison microscopy, and the fact that we're just putting a image from that comparison into our case notes. As far as the actual scanned data, it's being maintained in the Evofinder and on backup hard drive, but we're not treating those scans as if they're evidence because the evidence is still being maintained. So since the actual physical evidence still exists and can be reanalyzed through LCM or other VCM, we're just treating it as we would all other images.
And we actually do something kind of similar for Ballistics IQ. So all of the scans that are entered into the gallery, we actually will export and we will put them on our crime scene database. In addition to that, all of the reports that are initiated or any potential links that are found, those are also extracted and we keep those on a hard drive database. And obviously the software completely stores all the files, all the information from those casings that are entered in there is kept also in their database and their hard drive. And there's obviously an auditing system as well. So even if you were to delete something, you can actually go in the audit section and see who deleted it. So ours, we back everything up and everything is actually stored within the software as well.
Here in
And I
Virginia,
know
we're still using Cadre for the screening cases. So these are not, and we are also taking Phoenix PD's approach that the cartridge case is actually the evidence. So we're not retaining the 3D images at this time because we can always go back to the cartridge case.
Yeah, I was curious if anyone had any of their cases in their casework requested for court yet, and if they've had any experts requesting the review of that data. And we may be too early to answer that question, but how we anticipated to provide that data, if the case file was going to provide that, or if you would be requested for the digital data.
So Heather, just to add to the group's conversation, one of the things that we do is we track both the CSA, which are the initial reports that come through the Ballistics IQ software from the triage. So it's the initial triage report. We track and download that. We also save those into our records, and we will print those for test fire entries only, because that information is not necessarily going back to the user. It's just information to track what the CSA report indicates in comparison to the test fires, and then we'll enter whichever sample needs to go into NIBIN. But for casework evidence that goes through, we track the CSA report, we download that, and we also print the VCC report when it comes back as well. And as Lacey mentioned earlier, all of that auditing information is saved within the software of the system. So one of the things that we've been able to do is go back in certain situations where we find information from, say, like a submitting agency, where they misnumbered a particular item, where they gave us an incorrect case number. And we can actually go back in the information for that particular case and update that information and print that sheet out for the case file. So it updates the audit trail, and we can print that information for that particular exhibit or all those exhibits in that case and put it in your case file. And just to answer your question, we've yet to have an agency or a district attorney or an outside defense attorney request a case file of this nature, but we do send out any VCM data directly to our detectives. So that information is out there. It is available for those investigators and detectives to forward to the district attorney or other parties to let them see what comparisons have been made on the virtual comparison side. But again, it's no more than, like Mike said, it's just an image of the comparison that was done at that particular time. So if they want a confirmation, they would come back to us.
All right, thank you, everyone. All right, Sabrina, you mentioned that there was a statistically significant difference in the variance for the different gels used. What are some of the implications of, and what would you recommend to labs looking to implement Cadre Forensics TopMat's GS3D scanner?
Well, we did find there was variance due to the gels. The measurements that the instrument is collecting are so precise or so small that we can't actually detect it with the human eye when we're looking at the scans of the cartridge cases. So it's almost like it's going above and beyond what we need with our human eye. So it doesn't really impact what we're using the scans for. So we don't feel like it's an issue with implementation. It was more of just what we discovered during our validation, where we were looking for, did a person cause the variance? Did the gel cause it? Did the environment cause it? So we just found out the gel did cause variances, but it's not a problem and it's not detectable by the human eye.
Thank you. For Deion, is the fee for getting a report from Ballistics IQ paid by the lab or the submitting agency?
So we don't charge our agencies a fee for service. We're not a fee for service laboratory. And to my knowledge, specifically within our laboratory and some of the agencies that are surrounding, the fee is associated with each submission to the virtual correlation center. So we assume all financial responsibility for each case that we submit. Something that we've done specifically at our agency is we are very selective in which cases we submit to the VCC for outside agencies. Obviously, if they're high profile cases and they need an urgent response, and we're in the middle of another urgent case or a comparison, we would submit those directly. So far, we've been lucky and we haven't had to tell an agency no as far as any submission to the VCC. So we've been very thankful for that.
And then another question for either you, Deion, or Lacey. If you have NIBIN, why won't you just use that for developing your leads?
I will say for us as a law enforcement agency, we don't have NIBIN. We actually used to have NIBIN many years ago. We had a lot of issues with it, to which we gave it back to ATF. So currently our agency doesn't have NIBIN. And even when we did have NIBIN, we get a faster turnaround rate using Ballistics IQ. And so that was a plus for us. And in addition to that, I can really narrow down my search to just our local or surrounding areas, as to which NIBIN, it will search things all over the United States and anything that's in the database. And it could take a really long time to get results back. So even if we had it, I personally find Ballistics IQ for what we use it for works better, and it gives us faster results.
For our agency, since we are a NIBIN entry point, one of the things that benefited us the most was to be able to take out that subjectivity of which sample is better. And we also ran into the problem of not wanting to hand our technician, our NIBIN technician, evidence and have them do a specific triage for, say, 5 to 10 cartridge cases. And those cases where we were receiving evidentiary items that came in and it was 60 or more, that would take a long time for myself and my coworker to independently go through each one of those for triage. Having Ballistics IQ on the front end of that triage, took that away. That triage report is able to establish how many samples need to go into the NIBIN system and how many guns I'm looking at within a matter of minutes in comparison to having to enter one or more. And then in addition to that, one of the things that NIBIN doesn't provide us with is the ability to search evidence within the same case. So if we were to utilize it as a triage resource, we would almost have to change characters on items to enter it in and force the system to do something that it's not designed to do. We've seen examples of that. And unfortunately, what we're finding is that there are duplicates that have been entered into the database. And it's unfortunate, but we've actually hit to some of those items. But ultimately, one of the things that benefits us the most is the fact that going through Ballistics IQ, if we get a potential link, we're also able to see that potential link is showing up in NIBIN. And never before have we had a system that's able to do checks and balances on both sides. And that's one of the great things about it, is that, we've run into situations where we're finding things in Ballistics IQ, and maybe it's just a little bit further out in the correlation results of NIBIN, but we know it's there, so we can go looking for it. So that's been a benefit as well.
Thank you both. Well, we're getting down to the last little bit here in our Q&A, about 5 minutes or so left. So we'll take a few more questions. So Alan, with so many scoring algorithms out there, what thoughts or concerns do you have with the algorithm used in RapidFit?
Yeah, so one of the nice things about how we develop RapidFit is it is something that you can swap things out. So let's say one of these days someone comes up with a much better algorithm, CMC is no longer performing the way it needs to perform, then you simply swap it out, recalculate the scores, and that's now your new RapidFit algorithm moving forward. But at the same time, you have the ability to include all the other vendor algorithms as well, where it's no longer an idea where there's only one algorithm to rule them all. In statistics, it's all of your calculated reporting and all those statistics is based on your assumptions and based on your background populations. So there's no one right answer. The key point here is being able to defend your assumptions in the statistical models, the population you use, and the scoring method used. And in order to do that, a lot of it has to be open source. So that's one of the key points is when you use these algorithms and you use these methods, you need to know, or at least it has to be published, it has to be out in the open, people know how it works, and it's not just a black box. So I'm not too worried about the different algorithms out there. My main focus is on validating the current one that we have.
Alan. All right, so the last question, I know I've heard this question asked in the community, and so I'm going to pick this last question for our presenters here to talk about. And I know each lab has different terminology for positions, and we have different setups in our laboratory and workflow. But for the presenters, would you suggest that firearm toolmark examiners do the scanning on any of these type of technologies? Or could you have technicians, however we classify our non-examiners, do the scans so that the examiner would have more time to do the critical comparisons?
I'll jump in there real quick on this one. This is something that I've heard as well come up numerous times. And for us, we approach it as the examiner should be the one doing the scanning, because of how we're implementing the 3D system as a type of microscopy. So we want to ensure that the analyst that is doing the comparison is also the one doing the scanning. We'll have also already looked at all that same evidence under our stereo zoom microscope. So we can ensure that what we're seeing on the scan is what we're physically seeing on the items of evidence. And this is just one more step to ensure that the quality of the scans are being maintained the way we intend them to be used for the microscopy aspect, as well as with the relatively quick acquisition time, we can sit there, do the scans, and then while we're sitting there, immediately proceed into our microscopy.
I'll say for us on this side with Ballistics IQ, I have 12 crime scene technicians that actually enter in the casings into the software. What the great thing about the software is, if we do a case submission, the firearm examiners on their side of the house are really great. If they find a casing, if they're doing analysis and they find a casing that has a wrong label, the orientation's wrong, or anything's off with it, they will actually let us know to where we can go back in there and fix it. A huge selling point for us was that it was user-friendly. There is training that's required before you can actually use the system, of course, and everybody's required to take that. And I did have them practice doing backlog to make sure they were doing everything correctly before we started going live with the program. However, that was a huge selling point for us. And I felt comfortable knowing that even after the tech submits something, I can go back behind them and look, make sure it's correct. And then I'm also having another set of check and balances, because the firearm examiners that are looking at the case will also tell us, hey, you know, this scan needs to be redone, this orientation's off. So they will actually let us know to where we can immediately go in there and fix it. So that was a huge selling point for us.
So to add to what Lacey and Mike said, I think to a large extent, I know this is probably an answer nobody wants, but it really depends on the system that's being utilized. And how technically savvy the individual that's doing the acquisition needs to be, or how your independent SOP is set up. You know, for our laboratory, we have a standard operating procedure that coincides with the recommended process associated with the Ballistics IQ system is supposed to be, and we utilize that from start to finish. In our internal validation, we ran some reproducibility studies, independent for myself and also my coworker, to determine if how we entered it would change the CSA report prior to being submitted to the VCC. So I think that has a lot to do with each independent laboratory and how you're going to carry it out in the end. Those results, I think, as many of us know, may fluctuate depending on who's doing it and how it's being done, how the positioning is being, the positioning of that particular evidence item is being placed on that instrument, all that can have an effect associated with the outcome.
All right, well, that concludes our Q&A session. So thank you, everybody, for your patience with me. And a big thank you and a round of applause to all of our presenters during this session today. Thank you very much.